Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bible and Archaeology podcast. It is the end of the month when we're recording this, coming out in August. But it's time for a news roundup of sorts. We're not going to be going through, as always, we're not going through every news story from the month. We are just picking a couple that we think need a little more conversation.
Yeah.
And so this month, in the past months, we've done this a little bit different every time because it's different amounts of articles every time.
And you never know what's going to come out in a month and how stories are going to be portrayed and things like that.
Yeah, where things are going to go, who is going to pick up what and do what with what, and go on all kinds of wild tangents with other things. So we, this month, decided to go about it this way. I picked a story.
I picked a story.
You picked a story. And then we collaboratively picked one that we want to talk about in kind of the, well, why is this, not why does it exist, but why is this getting the coverage that it is? Just one that we think needs some conversation around some of the material within it.
And the implications of it.
Yes. So we'll go one that's a Jordan pick, one that's a Mary Kate pick, and then one that is the where are we going from here? Again, there are weekly news stories that you do here on the channel, shorts. Those also get linked on our website. So if you're wanting to go and read the article that you are pulling from, that happens every single week. You can go and find those things regularly there for you. There is too much news, too many archaeological stories every week to fully cover. So we're just wanting to do a little bit here. And if you're ever thinking like, hey, I would really like you to cover this story, send it to us.
And we'll do it.
We're always happy for more. And sometimes, like these, it needs more than 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And so that's what this is for. So we'll start with my pick first.
Yes.
I'll push my way in at the beginning for another AI story.
And you've been really liking these AI stories, I feel like, lately.
Well, liking.
Not liking, not in necessarily like fondness terms.
Well,
but
I'm conflicted. I mean, I'm a little bit conflicted because I do like them. I have been fond of some of them, but not of all of them.
Yeah.
And so this month, yet again, we have another news story about AI being used related to the world of texts and archaeology in a way that is somewhat similar to what we talked about with the Enoch model and the Dead Sea Scrolls, but working in a different way.
So what is this model?
So this model, interestingly, is made by Google. So this comes from Google's DeepMind AI program. It is not their first one, but it's the new iteration within a number of AI models that they've had. Their last one being Ithaca. Before that, they had Pythia. So lots of Greek names here. This one is named Aeneas because they're moving into a new lane. They're looking at Latin texts. And so something that I think is interesting in the way they're describing it, I like this for a lot of reasons. One, it's bringing the power of Google, or continuing to bring the power of Google and their AI research into the space of academic AI tools. Because it's a lot of work to try to build these things. We talked recently with Matthew Cunningham about AI, which will be coming out shortly, and some of the limitations regarding data sets and background and how these things need to work. And there's a lot of complexities in doing this.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's confusing.
It's extremely confusing.
I mean, so Aeneas is a database that's compounded, 176,000 Latin inscriptions?
So the way they describe it, and I think Google's press release, there's a lot of news stories with this, but if you're looking for one, the one that I'm going to link down below is Google's own press release about this, because they also link to an article that they did for the journal Nature.
Yeah.
So they have an article describing some of the walkthrough, but their press release, unsurprisingly, is really good at explaining some of this as well. So they're secondary news stories, but you can kind of go directly to the source on this one. The way they describe it is they say this is the first artificial intelligence model for contextualizing ancient inscriptions. When working with ancient inscriptions, historians traditionally rely on their expertise and specialized resources to identify parallels, texts that share similarities in wording, syntax, standardized formulas, or provenance. And so they are looking to accelerate this time-consuming work by reaching across thousands of Latin inscriptions, retrieving parallels, and allowing historians to interpret and build on the model's findings. So something that's different, a little bit different about this one than if you're thinking back to the Enoch model.
Yeah, which only...
The Dead Sea Scrolls model, right? We can come to the sample size here in a second too.
Okay.
But this one, the way they're framing it immediately is, we want to help you, the individuals, contextualize the inscriptions. It's not the only thing that it can do. It can do some other stuff too. but they are foregrounding this will help you put it in conversation with other inscriptions.
Yeah.
So that you, the academic, can better study these, can better create parallels, find discrepancies within whole or partial inscriptions. And that's a place where I think for people who have the AI fears.
And the AI fears are very present, especially in the realm of academics.
There's a lot of reason in the world of academia to have some fear about AI, as in lots of spaces.
Yeah.
But there's also reasons, I think, for optimism and positive views. And I think this is a model, not just the model itself, but this framework of this can help you. This can lighten your research load because you're going to offload. Doesn't mean you don't have to do anything yourself, but you can offload some of the background work to say, hey, go and scrub through. Like you mentioned, they pulled from 3 or 4 existing databases of inscriptions to build their data set that they trained their model on. It's not trained on the whole internet.
No.
It's trained on a vetted set.
And I think that's a very important part that we talked about a little bit with other chat models, how they are trained on a much, much wider database.
A difference, a big difference here is they're pulling from the epigraphic database Roma, the epigraphic database Heidelberg, and the epigraphic database Clauslabi. Those are the 3 that they use to create what they call the Latin epigraphic data set. So working from those 3 collections that have been developed by historians, epigraphers, specialists, taking that information, that's vetted information, using that to make one data set from which Aeneas works instead of turning it loose to the internet is a big difference between trying to put something into chat and say, hey, can you find context for this? Because it will turn to the entire internet.
Yeah.
Which will have vetted sources and unvetted sources. They are trying to use this to say we're going to limit the amount of information that it has, which creates difficulties. But in doing that, it also creates, hopefully, a stronger set of comparisons for you and better results out of that. And so that is a big difference in the way I think that it can help you contextualize the ancient inscriptions because, well, where is it pulling this from? Can I trust the thing that it's pulling this from? What's the source that it's giving me? These are the places where, for right now, it is pulling this from. And they're also developing this in partnership with a number of universities who are collaborating with this, and then historians and scholars to say, hey, can you help test? When it's saying it sees these parallels, do you agree or do you disagree? Something else that it can do is attempt to restore gaps in text.
Yes, but the accuracy on this isn't quite great yet.
Perfect. Yeah, because they say the biggest one is the parallels search. That's the one they're wanting to advertise the most.
So when we're talking about these parallels, it's looking for when phrasing and text and other inscriptions come up in parallel to others.
In parallel inscriptions, yeah. So it's either in like names that can be connected between them, place names, formula types. The parallels can exist in a wide variety of things. I mean, I think, you can think of it similar to like a biblical text. Does a phrase get repeated? Okay, so we have parallel instances, not just in the Gospels, but in the Hebrew Bible. How does this come up? It's doing the same thing for these inscriptions, allowing it to create what they call a historical fingerprint for these inscriptions. The second is this multimodal input, which allows the model to determine the geographical provenance. And so using textual and visual information, it tries to give you a location for these, restoring gaps in text, and what they call the state-of-the-art performance, which is the restoration of damaged texts. And so if it's damaged, can it help you read it? The one about the gap filling is the area where it seems like the most growth, but also the biggest place for question. Because it has a 73% accuracy and gaps up to 10 characters.
But only 58% accuracy when the length of the missing text is
unknown.
Yeah.
And now a difficulty with that is, okay, if it's unknown, how do we even know? And so that's where they say they have had it create filled in versions of this is what we think. This is what the model thinks based on the parallels should go in here. And then they've turned it over to scholars to say, what would you say goes into this gap? And then let's compare these things. And so 58%, not great.
But also you're trying to fill in a text that we don't have. So I don't know. I guess my question is, how do you grasp that accuracy in general if we don't have the text?
If you don't have it exactly, and this can be places where we don't have the inscription anymore, but do we have a record from a historian who says so-and-so built this statue and the base of it read. And so we might have the record of the inscription preserved in another thing. Maybe not in another inscription, but in another text. And so it tells us these things. We can see similar materials like if you turn to Pausanias, who gives this telling of traveling around Greece and descriptions of what these places are. That's something that archaeologists have used to try to understand places where, well, where might these artifacts have come from, or how are these places aligned? This is one telling of it, but does it help us fill in details? And so outside of just inscriptions, there are things that people can turn to help fill that out, but it's not perfect because it is a really difficult thing to say, well, we think this is what this would have been, either because of the formula that normally when this opening happens, this is the sequence of words that gets used. And so you have name and dedicatory phrase and to who. Okay, and we can fill some of that in. And then usually it's followed by part B. And that should read something like this. It's trying to work off of that, but it's going to have gaps. But that's the kind of place where there will probably be the most criticism of it, because how good are you, AI model Aeneas, at filling that in? Are you better than the humans? Maybe, maybe not. How good are the humans at doing this? Some may be better than others. What types of bias exist within the model, but also within the scholars? Those are areas where there's going to be a lot of rippling and fighting, I think, but hopefully places where it can become more finely tuned as the parallel gets stronger in its ability to identify parallels, or just helping the scholars fill in those gaps by saying, hey, there's a gap in this text. Can you find other parallels for me from the parts that we have so that I can then propose a reconstruction of the parts that are missing without having to go through all 180,000 of these from these 3 data sets myself? It doesn't remove that work, though.
Does Google and Aeneas recognize bias at all? Do they address the model's bias at all?
They don't have anything in at least their smaller description. I didn't see anything in there. They have an article in the journal Nature that talks through this as well. They didn't go into like the most robust description of their bias training. What does that look like? I think the part that leans towards that the most is their statements about not training it on the internet.
Yeah, because if you're just going from a database of only inscriptions, where would bias come in?
So bias could come in the inscriptions that are included in those data sets. So what gets left out? Why do pieces get left out? Or if those sets have proposed reconstructions for pieces, how are those vetted? It could come in as it is it giving a ranking of one data set over another? Are all of them weighted equally in the search results? So when it goes to create a parallel, if there are 5 parallels possible, does it propose them all as equally likely? Or does it maybe say one is more likely? And if so, why? Does it give a preference to a place or to a time region? So those are the kinds of things that might still be places of bias in the same way that scholars have of, I am looking for a parallel to this one.
So
where do you turn first? Do you go to Rome? Do you go to an outlying city? Do you go to a standalone inscription? Do you go to a statue? Do you go to, where do you turn? Those types of biases exist in human scholars and can exist in the models. Cutting the internet out of it is one of their attempts to try to minimize the bias of scholars, because that prevents it from having the historical reading to say, okay, well, scholarship has historically preferred this reading or this location, and we don't want it to just repeat that back to you. Because if that exists, it is going to give that back.
And it's going to learn that.
It will learn that, and it'll say, I think this is what you want, because this is what the majority of the results that I'm finding are. And so it is not creating new thought for you and presenting that. It's saying, I'm surveying the field. Here is the state of that, and I'm giving that back to you. So cutting that part out should hopefully reduce some of that. But as they expand their data sets, as they bring in more information, that's the place that it can get stronger, but also places where bias can enter the picture.
Okay. And then
one last thing, I think this might be where you're going, is the data set itself.
Yeah, that is where I was going.
the number of inscriptions.
176,000.
Which sounds like a ton.
But it's not.
But to hear them talk about it, they acknowledge this is one of the weaknesses of their model. Because 176,000 data points, essentially, it's not a ton to train this on compared to a model that uses the entire internet. And so their disclaimer is, hey, we have this. We built it on these. It'd be nice to have more. We intend to bring in more. But it is just one of those shocking things to try to think about. Like 176,000 inscriptions is viewed as a small data set.
In Latin.
Exactly. So like in this narrow area, this is viewed, Google, you see this as a small amount, and yes, the answer for them is this. This is small. And I want to emphasize that because if we look back towards that Enoch model, where they were developing their own AI model to help date Dead Sea Scrolls based on a number of Dead Sea Scroll fragments that they had radiocarbon dated. Their data set, which they acknowledge is something that they would like to have more on, they were trained on 24.
Mm-hmm. So 24, 176,000.
So yeah, sample size. This is one of those areas where sample size, and we'll come back to sample size later as well, can make a really big difference in how much trust should we put in this?
Yeah.
How many questions should we have? Are there places where bias can come in? The more data pieces, the more bias. But also if there's not enough data, that can present bias itself.
Yeah.
And so just to see the way that the different groups are talking about their models and the data that they have and the places where there's weakness and the places they want to get more, it's interesting to put these things next to each other because this is just one. I'm sure there will be another next month of someone else who's created another model that's doing something different. And the hope that they all get better.
Yeah.
And the hope that they all continue to help us do more things.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's simply too much.
There's way too much.
For any one person to know.
I mean, think about sorting through 176,000 inscriptions.
Yeah, it's the kind
that's of unfathomable.
That's impossible. And so it's hopeful that their hope, and the scholars who collaborated with this, their hope is that it is able to help supplement the work of the scholars, and that it can provide a starting point.
Yeah.
Rather than just turning to 176, where do I go? I have no idea. Let me pick some random samples.
Yeah.
That this can give you a place to begin with. It doesn't fill that gap completely. It doesn't remove you from needing to do these things. There's places where it has issues. It's not 100%. Don't just use this and turn it in. They're not saying that. But it's an interesting variation on a similar story and on a similar model. And as more companies like Google get into this place, it'll hopefully stay free, hopefully be open to public, hopefully it participates in that side rather than becoming a privatized enterprise that only universities who pay in get access to. Hopefully this is something that everyone can participate in because that will make it stronger, more robust, hopefully less bias prone. But yet another AI in the world of scholarship story.
Yeah. So my story.
Your story.
I picked a site of burials in Tinshemet cave in central Israel. And this isn't relatively as new. I mean, the cave was discovered in 2016, and they're finding early humans that date from around 110 to 100,000 years ago. This really intrigued me because that's really interesting to me.
It's very old.
I mean, human remains from 100,000 years ago, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
But these remains were found under layers of sediment. And so they have to kind of like chisel them out to get them. But what was the most interesting to me was the aspect of burial within this. So within this, they're finding what they think is the first human evidence of burial practices. So humans being placed in fetal position.
Yeah.
Or burial position with grave goods like rocks and ochre and things like that, and decorative objects or pigments that could have led to decorative objects is just really interesting to me, as well as that these materials were sourced from like thousands of miles away.
Yeah, not all immediately local objects.
Yeah.
Prestige items.
Yeah.
By transport.
And that's so interesting to me because I feel like what really got me on this one is we talk about ancient people all the time, but not 100,000 years ago.
Not 100, right? Because we're moving all the way back. Normally, we'll reach back to like Bronze Age.
Yeah.
And we're going all the way back into the Middle Paleolithic for this.
Yeah.
Which is, right, largely very far outside. So this is 130,000 to 80,000 years ago, approximately, into which they're throwing, these burials happen in this window around 100,000 years ago, like you said. So way, way back there. And it's interesting that they talk about in this article, this isn't the only set of Middle Paleolithic cave burials known in the region. And so because of that, they're able to look at broader patterns as well of what types of traditions are emerging. They have examples of Homo sapien and Neanderthal burials in the cave. And so is there overlap between these? Are they starting to come together? Are they reusing the same places? It's an interesting and slowly ongoing.
Very slow. It's going to take them many years to chisel these skeletons out of this sediment.
Yeah, because if you see the photos, right, they have the photos in the news stories where it's pieces of bone sticking out of what looks like rock. And the natural question is like, okay, well, how did the bone get inside of the rock?
And this is a question I asked Jordan earlier.
And they don't, I wish they would. In their article, they don't describe as much
how
the full process of the sediment buildup. But they do say, right, this is a sedimentary buildup within the cave that has become essentially like concrete, like it's cemented sediment that over 100,000 years, these different mineral deposits, things like ash, water coming in, as happens with caves, stalactites and stalagmites build, grow up, or come down. The caves grow over time. The same thing is happening here. So as these individuals are buried, they're buried within and then continue to be buried by more, which then makes it very hard to get those remains out because they found the remains of 5 individuals, 2 full skeletons, 3 skulls, and then some assorted bones and teeth. But in order to get those out, they're using essentially
like dental tools.
They're using pneumatic tools, die grinders, electric hammers, hand chisels in order to get these things out, which is a very different process than if you're looking at other excavations where you might be, maybe you're using a pick, maybe using a tree, maybe you're using a hand trowel, or you go to some sites where they're moving very, very slowly and you're with brushes, or how you're working around these bones. The needs of it in this cave, it's an extremely different situation.
It's extremely different. And it's really interesting to think, because I was confused when we first discussed this story. I mean, I was like, how did they get under the rock?
They didn't grow out of the rock.
Well, no, obviously.
Well, I mean, we say obviously, but wait for the bad version of this from
Daily Mail.
Not the Daily Mail to say something about how this, I don't know, weird theory, X, Y, or Z, and the humans are coming out of the rock, because it is the type of thing that if it doesn't get explained, well, how did they end up in the...
It doesn't make that much sense.
How did they end up in the cemented deposits? How did they get into this? Oh, this must mean, did they have special... No, it's the way that it naturally builds up over thousands, tens of thousands, 100,000 years.
Well, I also think what's interesting about this is, like you said, I do a lot of news stories, and a lot of things I cover are burial practices. And like Bronze Age burial practices... things like that, the funerary goods and shifts in funerary goods. But this is so much older than that, and we have funerary goods.
You still have grave goods, and in just looking at some of it too, there are still, on the one hand, they're looking at similarities between these various Middle Paleolithic burials to say, okay, there seems to be, at this period of time, a similarity in the way they position their deceased, and the types of grave goods that they bring in those. But even in looking towards the longue durée continuity of these practices, you have some not dissimilar practices much, much later in the types of things that are associated with graves, like the animal remains.
Animal remains.
The inclusion of materials, pigments that could have been a part of an art process or just an object of great value, because if that is brought over a long distance... Which indicate, then that's a high prestige good. So this is a very old version of the term conspicuous consumption, where you have all of this wealth, and how do you show off that you have it? Well, you're going to get buried with it. You have so much, or you are so revered that this goes with you when you die. And so it's still, talking on data sets, a small number for now of burials. It can't speak to things broad sale everywhere for all times. No,
it's not applicable like that.
But you have a number within this cave, and then a number of other caves that can speak to this within the region that can begin to tell us more about shifts that are happening here, and as well as shifts that are happening much earlier than you see some of these practices emerging in other places.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're still using the language in all of their descriptions of like the potentially the oldest known yet, because there's always the chance something new gets published tomorrow, or that the dating goes up or goes down on theirs or on someone else's, depending on the way, because they're trying to date as much stuff as they can.
Yeah.
Which was a very fascinating part of their article, talking about how they are dating basically everything that they can out of the ground. They're dating soil samples. They're using things to date the bone. They're using things to date individual pieces of flint to see when was it last exposed to sunlight, to try to pin down as best they can that window of time, because we're trying to get so far back.
Yeah.
That we need multiple ways to triangulate a date with any sense of security to have something to say about it.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really fun story too.
I think it's fun. I like the anthropology side of things sometimes, because like we're all humans. It's so interesting. Like,
well, I mean, not all of them were human.
Well, okay. Yes.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
It
were
could
Neanderthals
change.
Human? I don't know. That's not what I do. But, they're discussing the inclusion of variations.
Well, I mean,
within the same place.
We have funerary practices.
We do.
Everyone has funerary practices in a lot of things we look at. And it's so interesting that we can look at humans from potentially 100,000 years ago who are doing things that are not dissimilar from things we do.
Yeah, things change slow.
And I love parallels like that.
Yeah, you bury people, it's not so different than it was a long time ago.
And you want to give them nice things.
You want to give them some nice things, or you don't want to give them some nice things, but you do anyways out of respect or out of whatever. They seem to have some nice things as well. So that one is interesting. We'll put the link to that article down below as well. And I'm sure it will be one, as you said, it's going to take them a long time.
Yeah, a very long time.
So it will be one that we'll be able to return to as they have more to say, as more stuff comes out from this. I'm sure there will be many good preliminary and final reports that come out from this excavation over time.
Now our last one. This kind of is a little bit of a wrap-up of the last two.
This one connects, it does. It's almost like we planned this. Connects a little bit of some of the questions about all of the things that we've come before.
DNA dating,
burials, sample size, burials. And so this is an article that came out in the journal Nature. Again, we've spent some time with the journal Nature.
Yeah,
a lot of these also came out like in the last week.
Yeah.
And so there's like this flood of things at the end of July. But it is titled Whole Genome Ancestry of an Old Kingdom Egyptian. And so if you look at news reporting on this, they are reporting, the sequencing of the genome of an individual with North African Neolithic ancestry, saying that approximately 20% of his genetic ancestry can be traced to genomes representing the Eastern Fertile Crescent, including Mesopotamia and surrounding regions. And so their takeaway is that, okay, this seems to support an idea that there are contacts between these regions, and that it's not just limited to animals and plants and writing, but also human migration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you'll see the headlines that talk about genome sequencing, 20% comes from this. Look at this might mean what? Okay, there are connections between these peoples. People are moving back and forth. Does this change the way we're understanding who lived in these regions? This comes from 2800 to 2500 BCE. So this is not as far back as the last one, but reaching back. Okay, that's the way it'll get largely talked about.
But it doesn't change anything other than we have one individual.
That's the part of it, which they are very upfront.
They are, and their reporting is good about it.
The reporting that talks about this does foreground that. But if we scroll down to their conclusion, when they have gone through their methodology, their process, the potential takeaways that they want to have, something that they say, our results demonstrate the feasibility of ancient genome sequencing, which is significant because oftentimes that is something that is no longer possible.
Especially due to mummification in Egypt. Because destroys the DNA. Yeah.
The time, the type of climate that it's in, the degradation that happens to the bones.
I also think we have to say that this individual was a man like 40 to 60 years old, something around that age range, who was found buried in a pot.
Yes, which is not a totally uncommon.
No, but
it's an interesting grave practice.
Yeah, and it aided in their ability.
In the preservation, and also creates a little bit of the problem for them too, because it's great. Yes, you're able to do this. That's good. This is a sign that we can go in and do this. Using his teeth, they used 7 of his teeth to pull out.
But they used 1 tooth.
They used 7. They used 7.
Okay.
They used 7 of his teeth to pull out, and then they sequence from that. However, they say our analyses are limited to a single Egyptian individual who, on the basis of his relatively high status burial, may not be representative of the general population. Our results revealed ancestry links to earlier North African groups and populations of the Eastern Fertile Crescent. So, great, we can do this, but our sample size is 1. And that 1 is also of a high status individual.
And they were kind of confused on his status because he was found in this pot in a tomb, but analysis of his bones and his joints showed that he was a hardworking individual in life, if that's how you would put that. So they were kind of confused on his status. They think he might have been a really good pottery maker who got some status in the end of his life.
Yeah, he says that there's some age-related osteoarthritis, there's activity-induced musculoskeletal indicators of stress from an extended period of physical labor, seemingly in contrast to his high-status tomb burial. And so some kind of routine physical activity that may have clues of occupation. And so these are the normal, like if you're looking at stress fractures on bones, you're going to see this a lot in individuals who, there's a lot of them from Egyptian burials where individuals who participated in heavy manual labor, the construction of things like pyramids, there's the same kinds of injuries, damage to the lower back, damage to the arms, broken limbs. Those types of things are normal workplace injuries. But you will also see this in domestic labor as well, things like grinding grain manual on your hands, the repeated action of that, much like you can get repeat action injuries now, it's there, but grinding those stones together sends vibrations up your arm that you can see in the remains of the women who participated in grinding that grain in their arms and their elbows, where you see these microfractures over time.
Which is so interesting that you can see that.
It is. And so here, he has some of these injuries that may seem to align with a different status than the way that he's buried. Because the way that he's buried seems to say this, but some of these things about his bones might seem to say that. So does he have an occupation? Did he move out of a lower status into a higher status? That kind of stuff we don't know without more insight.
Yeah.
But more complication for them saying, our sample size is 1.
Yeah.
Our sample size is 1. So validity that we can go in and sequence this. Okay, we're able to go and sequence this. The hope probably being for them, now that we've proven this can work.
Yeah.
Does someone else want to give us more money so that we can try to go do this with more? Or, hey, other people, do you want to try and go do this now too? Do you have access to remains? Because that's another part of this problem, is the access to remains. And
I think this individual was found a very long time ago.
Yeah, it's not a new set of remains.
No.
And so these types of ongoing things of, well, when you're doing this type of work, this is anytime you're dealing with human remains, right? There's questions of what is the dignity to the individual of doing this? Where were these found? When were they found? Are they from an ongoing excavation? Are they held within a museum? What is the level of intrusion of this? Are we sure we can do this? It's the same types of questions that happen with anything, but especially when you're dealing with the remains of individuals.
Yeah.
And so being able to say like, hey, we want to try to genome sequence these things. One of those questions you're going to have is, well, will this work? Or are you just destroying these remains? And so now they're hopefully going to turn around to say, well, no, this has worked. And so we would like to get a better understanding of, it's not just for funsies of sequencing this, but to give us an idea of the connections that existed within the region and between larger regions by saying, we know there is trade of goods.
Yep.
But what kind of migration patterns happened?
And what kind of intermarrying and things like that. Yeah.
And across what levels of society, if that can expand to more individuals. Questions exist though of, okay, what kind of burials can you get and what from time and remains, and all of those things become difficulties. But this was one that I thought was a little bit confusing to me in that it's interesting in that it worked, yes, but also feels like some of the coverage is really overstretching in a way that maybe they don't fully understand the limitations that they're trying to foreground fairly in their article by saying it's just one. Mm-hmm. We can't say too much. It's just one.
Yeah.
Instead of headlines that are like 20% from 20% of this, well, for that one individual.
Yeah, just one person.
They're not arguing this for everyone. They're not arguing this for a wide range of society or a specific class.
Well, it could never be generalizable.
It shouldn't be.
No.
But you will see it be generalized because that's the way that, whether intentionally or accidentally, it gets framed. But they're just saying for this one individual. This isn't a claim about a broader swath of culture, of society, of individuals. So that's the third one that's a little bit of like interesting.
But needed more explanation on applicability and things like that.
Yeah, but I think needs more context. And again, we will link to their article.
Yep.
It's not super long and it has really good information. Like if you are interested in how they did this, great descriptions.
Yeah.
Very detailed, very technical. So the links for all three of these will be down below. You can go and read either a news story or go and read the article itself. I would always recommend going to read the article itself. Give the first authors, give those researchers the credit, by going to those sites and reading those articles when they're freely available, if they're freely available, shows, hey, this is valuable research that people are interested in. And so that can help them a lot going forward. However, understandably, not everything is open access to everyone. And so then that's where we'll put, a good news story version of this too, that can hopefully get you along your way or something that you can share with someone in addition to being able to share this with them. If you're like, hey, you want to hear about AI and burials? I know a place for you.
I know some people.
Some people who are interested in these things. If there are stories that we didn't touch this month that you are interested in seeing more from, send them to us, leave them in the comments, send us an email. I would also say, come and join us on Patreon because this kind of stuff gets covered there as well within extra things. So if you are interested in bonus content, like a weekly bonus episode. Right now, we're starting to walk through Exodus, a couple chapters every week. Bonus content from guests, all kinds of things. You can find us over on Patreon, Bible and Arc on Patreon. We appreciate your support. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you find us. It helps us. Hopefully, it helps you stay in touch with us. Is there anything else we didn't cover for this week?
I don't think so. I mean, there's infinitely things we didn't cover for this week.
There's a bunch of other stories. There's a couple stories there's one in particular that I don't want to talk about yet. Well, there's two, I guess. There's one that we'll come to next month. And then there's one that we're hoping to get an interview for as well that should be fun. So tease those. I would also say we do have a very interesting interview coming out soon about AI. If you are interested in just kind of broader questions on AI, I found it very helpful.
Yeah.
I reached out to a friend who happens to have worked with OpenAI, and it was insightful and more confusing. I left in the way that I think you should when you understand something better and so you feel like you know it less.
Yeah.
That's the way I felt at the end. And so I think it's a very helpful conversation. That'll be coming out soon. Lots of good material coming your way. But for this week, we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
For all of us here at Bible and Archaeology, until next time.